All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the life cycle of a Justice Center case. Please know that we are recording this session and we will have this session posted on our website, and participants will get a copy of the slides, so you don't need to worry about that. We will also be accepting questions about the content of this session throughout the session, and that's to ask a question, because everyone who's participating except for the panelist is muted and off camera. If you have a question that you would like to ask the panelists, then use the chat function and we will take breaks and ask the questions throughout the session. So we'll begin with a little Zoom housekeeping. This session is a webinar. All participants are muted and off camera, and you won't be able to see the questions, just the panelists will see the questions that you ask us. Please look at the control bar at the bottom of your screen and take a look at the icons. If you don't see that control bar, just scroll your mouse down near the bottom and it should appear. As I said, keep an eye on the chat. We are putting some helpful information, web links, other things that are referenced throughout the session, and that's also where you can put in your questions. If you wish to have closed captioning on, please click on the closed captioning icon, and you will be able to get have that function work for you. So we are ready to begin, and I'm going to turn it over to our General Counsel, Krista Book, who will begin this presentation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Krista Book. I'm the General Counsel here at the Justice Center. Thank you all for joining us, and please feel free to ask questions, as Davin said this morning. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the life cycle of a case at the Justice Center. Okay, so first, a case would start with incident management, the report that would come into our VPCR. So reportable incidents. Mandated reporters must report reportable incidents, and that's in quotes because it's defined in the law, involving vulnerable persons. Just to give you some idea, in 2022, we had 12,602 reports of abuse and neglect. In the same year, with significant incidents, we had 25,862 significant incidents reported. Incidents may be reported, and I would go as far to say more of a must be reported, even if the individual receiving services does not suffer actual harm. So when the report is made, as I said, it comes into our VPCR, the Vulnerable Person Case Register, and a trained representative who works in our incident management unit in our call center would collect information from the reporter and would also give that caller an incident number. Reporters are protected by confidentiality laws, meaning we're not going to tell other people who it is that made that report. The call is recorded. So what you should have ready and handy when you call in is details that are about the victim, the subject, any witnesses that might be there. We're going to ask questions about the details of the incident, such as when did this happen, what time, what is the address where you are. They may ask who the parent provider is, a description of what happened, and we're also going to want to know who is the responsible state agency. So is this under OPWGD, OASAS, OCFS, etc.? And we're also going to want the name and address of the provider agency, including the facility and or program. So although you certainly will be given time on the call, it's best if you can gather some of that information as you're calling it in. We're also going to make confirmation that immediate protections are in place for the victim. So, whether that involves whether the staff is no longer in the home, whether the person is in the hospital or receiving medical treatment, the name, title, and contact information of others who may have had the same information as you, and this is going to be a later slide. We're going to talk about the multiple reporter requirements, so I'll save this until then. And then any other information that you may know that may assist with the investigation or review of the incident. So if there's any additional details that you think are important for us to know, you can let them know at that time. Otherwise, as I said, you're going to get an incident number when you call it in. You can always call back and give further detail as well if something becomes known. The next slide, multiple reporter requirements. So as I said, multiple reports regarding the same incident are not required if the mandated reporter knows that one, the incident was reported to the Justice Center, and two, they were named in the report as a person with knowledge about the incident. So say, for instance, two staff witnessed the same exact incident. They don't both have to call it in as long as the staff that calls it in gets the incident number and names the second staff as a person with knowledge about the incident. So that can go for, if there's 5 people in a particular program and it's decided it's going to be called in by a manager, that's fine as long as they name all 5 people so that we can reach out and contact to them if needed during the course of the investigation, and as long as everyone has the incident number and knows that it was reported. So after the call is taken, it's going to be classified. So a reportable incident, which are the numbers we went over earlier, are when it is classified as abuse and neglect, or classified as a significant incident, which would then go back to the agency. A non-reportable is what we call it when someone might call with a general inquiry, or it might be non-Justice Center in general, meaning it's not under our jurisdiction. So reports made to the Justice Center in 2022, we went over some of these numbers. Abuse and neglect was the 12,602. We had 1,709 reports of a death, almost 26,000 significant incidents. But then what we had is non-Justice Center incidents were 35,218. So an example of that might be, it was actually meant for the CPS hotline or something that happened with OCFS in a program that we don't have jurisdiction over. Sometimes people call and make reports that really belong to the Department of Health in an area that the Justice Center doesn't have jurisdiction over. Whatever it may be, we will figure out whether or not we have jurisdiction over it and classify it, or not an incident. So again, that's when we get general inquiries sometimes. In fact, we had over 11,000 of those last year. Significant incident classification. So each state agency has their own definition of significant incidents. So we work with all state agencies to make sure that classification of these incidents adhere to the regulatory standards for each agency. And again, those get referred back to the agency. The Justice Center does not investigate significant incidents. Okay, incident management allegation.
I'm sorry, Krista, there have been a few questions that have come in during this.
Okay.
And first, I just want to remind everyone that the slides will be available at the end of this presentation. So you answered this before, but I'm just going to ask it again. What happens if a report is made about a program that is not under the Justice Center's jurisdiction, like an OPWDD non-certified program?
That would get referred out to the appropriate agency.
Okay, thank you. If an incident occurred, the victim was was in another program at the time that an incident occurred, and then they get transferred, say it's a young person, they're transferred to another program. Sometimes those agencies will get contacted by the Justice Center with asking for some information. Will that agency that currently has the person in care who was a victim in another agency, will they find out what happened in the investigation for that victim?
No, we send it to the agency that's involved at the time.
Okay.
However, the state oversight agency is going to be aware, like the parent provider. So say it's the same parent provider, they should be aware.
Okay. And can you just provide a little bit more information about how incidents are classified, the kinds of things that you're looking at?
Yes, and I think we're about to go into this in the incident management allegation review and assignment. So
we'll table that one then.
Okay.
And it'll be answered in the next one. 2 more questions, and then we'll let you get back to this. What can agencies do when staff use the Justice Center to make false reports about their colleagues?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? What can agencies do
Yeah, what can
when?
provider agencies do if they have a staff member? The Justice Center can't do anything about staff members who do that, can they?
Oh, that's a pretty broad question. It's something that we do look into. While we don't have specific jurisdiction with respect to staff members making allegations against other staff members, we would possibly look at the nexus of that between those allegations and a service recipient. So say a service recipient is being neglected because of these continual allegations, or it's somehow impacting their care, we may look at it in that uh, kind of frame of reference. Also, making a false report to the VPCR is a criminal offense and it can be reported to law enforcement. And I will let Chief Ryan answer that if he has anything else to add.
I think, yeah, Tony?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Tony Ryan here, Chief Investigations at the New York State Justice Center. One of the first steps, what I would recommend, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit in my presentation, is the 3 business day review. So if a program identifies a potential for that, where there are false reports being reported to the VPCR, I would elevate that concern either through your SOA, but get that information to our 3 business review team, because what they would do is, with each new report that comes in from that particular program, that would, without question, go through our 3 business day review to try to solidify, enhance, or reclassify that information.
Okay, thank you. For those of you who don't speak Justice Center, SOA stands for the State Oversight Agency, the agency that licenses the provider agency. Last question, and then I'll let you go on. The total reports that were made to the Justice Center, those included COVID reports in, did they include those in 2022? Were we still receiving those from OPWGD providers?
Oh, sorry.
The number of incidents reported, total number of incidents reported to the Justice Center in 2022, did they include reports of COVID at OPWGD providers?
Only in the sense that it involved the abuse and neglect.
Okay, yeah, we had stopped that then. All right, I'm going to turn it back to you and we'll continue with questions at the next break.
Okay, good morning, everybody. As I stated, my name is Tony Ryan. I'm the Chief Investigations here at the New York State Justice Center. I'm going to take us through the next couple of slides here. I'm going to discuss the incident management, allegation review, and assignment. So our incident management unit, which is our call center, receives all cases of abuse and neglect death that are assigned to the Justice Center. They gather additional case information as needed. They determine case assignment, and they ensure that notifications are sent to law enforcement and the district attorney's office. So I previously, just a few moments ago, I spoke about our 3 business day classification assessment. So what that does is that allows the Justice Center to conduct a preliminary review of allegations using an evidence-based approach. What we do is, if a report goes through our 3 business day review, we reach out to the agency. We have a point of contact with each agency, and we ask them for additional information that will allow us to either support what's reported or to enhance the classification and reclassify that. The 3 business day classification assessment is available to Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, OMH, OASIS, OCFS, and State Ed. In 2022, there was 4,397 reports that were assessed by the 3 business day review team. 55% were reclassified as either significant incidents or non-Justice Center incidents. So what the 3 business day assessment allows us to benefit from is increased accuracy of incident classification. It ensures that appropriate safety measures are readily enhanced, a reduction in the length of time provider staff are out on administrative leave. It decreases the number of provider staff unnecessarily placed on administrative leave, and it narrows the scope for investigative resources, ultimately reducing cycle time for all abuse and neglect investigations. So now I'll discuss the investigation process itself. Who investigates? The New York State Justice Center investigators are assigned to investigate reports that allege or appear to constitute criminal conduct. We also investigate the most serious incidents of abuse and neglect. We also investigate all abuse and neglect incidents in OASIS settings, state ed settings, and in the state-operated OCFS, OMH, and OPW facilities. Some things to know about our investigators. Many of our Justice Center investigators have previously worked in provider settings. Many of our Justice Center investigators and staff have family members served by providers under our jurisdiction. Our investigators also receive continuous training. What to expect during an investigation? The subject of an investigation will receive a letter notifying them and the entity conducting the investigation. In other words, if it's a Justice Center-led investigation, you'll be notified by the Justice Center. If it's a state oversight agency that's conducting the investigation, they'll be responsible for that notification to the subject. We'll conduct interviews and information gathering through the course of the investigation. We have updated guidance for staff to further explain our processes. The reporting of incidents, including online training, our investigative process, and our appeals process. It's located on the Justice Center website under the Providers and Staff tab. We also offer another unit here at the New York State Justice Center. It's our Individual and Family Support Unit. This unit guides individuals receiving services, their families through the reporting, the investigation, the final determination, and/or criminal process. We make referrals and serve as a liaison, promote responsive and efficient communication. The unit conducts outreach and tracks data and information. Understanding the investigative process. The Justice Center website has resources for individuals and families that can be found in the Advocacy and Support tab on our website.
There are a few questions. Thank you, Chief Ryan. The first one is, staff often work at different provider agencies, they may work at more than one or two, and if they do and they're involved in an incident in provider agency A, will provider agency B be notified about the outcome of the investigation at provider agency A for that staff person?
That's a really good question. And fortunately, we have our Office of General Counsel on this call, and I would defer that question to her.
Okay, can you just repeat that one more time? I'm going to make sure that I...
So if a staff person is involved in an incident of abuse or neglect or an allegation of abuse or neglect at provider agency A, and they moonlight or they also work at provider agency B, will provider agency B, who employs that person, also be notified about the outcome of the investigation?
The answer is it depends. So if it were to become a category 1, yes. Category 2s in certain circumstances would be. Category 3s generally would not.
Thank you. Are people who report incidents told how the incident is being classified at the time of reporting?
No, they are not.
Okay. I know you went over this a little bit before, but there have been people joining late. Just quickly, what prompts an incident to go through the 3 business day review process?
There are certain cases that are not eligible for the 3 business day review. They would be programs that are in the ICFs, any of our abuse, neglect, death reports. With that said, we if there's a particular concern with a particular program, i.e. frequent callers, that is something that can be identified for the 3 business day review. But generally, our goal was to get most of our calls and reports in the OPWD facilities, the OMH facilities, to go through the 3 business day review, because we found that when we looked at the percentage, like the added value of something, a report going through the 3 business day review, particularly in the OMH setting, in the OPW setting, we found there's a lot of value in that. So we try to get as many, if not all, of those reports that are outside of our abuse, neglect, death cases, that are outside of our ICFs, to go through the 3 business day review.
Thank you. And the next question is, who notifies the subject of an investigation that they are the subject of that investigation?
So for a Justice Center-led case, the assigned investigator is responsible for sending a subject notification letter to that employee.
One last question before we go to the break, and I also just want to make a statement. There have been some questions that are very specific to certain types of provider agencies. We won't be asking those kinds of questions here, but you can follow up with the Justice Center. You can send an email, you can call our general line, and we can get back to you. And so the last question is, who sets up the interview with the staff members? Is it the provider agency or the Justice Center?
So that does vary. There are certain programs or agencies where we go through HR or personnel or the program itself because they know the employee's schedule better than us. There are other times where we would reach out directly to the employee to schedule that interview or interrogation.
Right, thank you. I'm going to turn it back to, I believe, Krista.
Yes. Case review and closure. So after the investigation is complete, meaning everyone's been interviewed, we reviewed all the documents, I looked at all the evidence, the Justice Center reviews all investigations and makes a final determination and notifies all parties. This is with respect to abuse and neglect allegations, that is. The Justice Center also oversees corrective action plans as appropriate. Unsubstantiated reports, so reports that are unsubstantiated, including false allegations, are not publicly available and cannot be accessed by future employers. Obviously, the provider of the case where this happened would be notified that it would be unsubstantiated. Substantiated reports of abuse and neglect are classified into one of 4 categories. So category 4, this is a category that's made against a facility or provider agency that's not a custodian. So there are 2 different types of category 4 cases. So one is staff culpability is mitigated by systemic problems at a facility or provider agency, meaning that things are of such a state that it can't possibly come down to it being just one person that's involved here. There's multiple levels of problems that are systemic and kind of may stem from various different reasons. Or there's abuse and neglect that would be substantiated, but the perpetrator can't be identified despite a thorough investigation. So sometimes where we might see this, kind of the classic example I usually give is someone goes to the hospital with stomach pains and we find out that the person had ingested something like rubber gloves. And the doctor can say that this happened within the last 24 to 72 hours. And despite interviewing everyone and the person being on one-to-one, we can't figure out who it is that breached that level of supervision. In that case, we may do a category 4 where we say that abuse and neglect had to have occurred, but we can't determine who in that time period was the person that breached that level of supervision. A category 3, that's the lowest in our categories. It's substantiated findings of abuse or neglect, but the conduct does not meet the definition of a category 1 or 2. Category 3 substantiations, they're not publicly available and they can't be accessed by future employees. Category 2 is conduct in which the custodian, and this is directly from the statute, seriously endangers the health, safety, or welfare of a service recipient by committing an act of abuse or neglect. So 2 category 2s in a 3-year period results in a category 1 finding and placement on our staff exclusion list. There's a very specific way that you have to calculate this and look at notice. So I can explain it more in depth if needed, but it's a little bit confusing as to how that time period runs. Category 2 findings that are not elevated to Category 1, they're sealed after 5 years. Category 1 That's going to include things like serious physical abuse, sexual abuse, or other serious conduct by custodians. There are 14 different types of conduct that are spelled out within the statute. Placement on the staff exclusion list. 2 Category 2 findings in a 3-year period, as I stated, would place someone on the staff exclusion list, or 1 Category 1 finding. Names of the staff who are substantiated with a Category 1 finding, they're not made publicly available, but they would be made available if an employer had reached out to our criminal background check while potentially attempting to hire someone who may be on the staff exclusion list, and they would receive notice of the fact that that person is on the staff exclusion list. So the staff exclusion list, the individuals on the staff exclusion list are prohibited from being hired by any state-operated, certified, or licensed agency or provider that serve people with special needs. To date, we have over 800 people on the staff exclusion list, and since 2014, there's been nearly 250 times that a check has resulted in a match and the provider has been notified that the applicant was on or pending placement on the staff exclusion list. So meaning someone received a Category 1 and maybe went to a different agency and didn't disclose that and was trying to be hired. That is some of the instances where it happens. And then that provider would be notified that in fact the person is on the staff exclusion list. Okay, so abuse and neglect case categories. Now, this changes year to year, but I can tell you it always looks a lot like this exact pie chart. It doesn't change drastically. So in 2022, we had 3,217 substantiated cases of abuse and neglect. Now, if you remember back, we had over 12,000 cases categorized. So this is already, of that number, the smaller percentage of 3,217 were substantiated. Of those 3,217, 75% of them became a Category 3. So it's approximately 33% to begin with that are substantiated. And of that 33%, 75% of those are Category 3. The next being a Category 2 at 22%. Category 4 and Category 1 are similar, coming in at only 1.5% of our cases. So who receives notification at the conclusion of our investigation? It's either going to be the family member and or the victim. So it's going to depend on whether or not that person represents themselves or whether they have a personal representative. If they do, the personal representative would be notified. Also, the provider and the state oversight agency are going to receive notice of the findings, as well as the subjects of the investigation. They will all receive a letter stating, whether it was substantiated or unsubstantiated, and if substantiated, what was the actual allegation, whether it's neglect, deliberate inappropriate use of restraint, sexual abuse. No matter what it is, you'll be told what that allegation is and what category it came out to be. So corrective action plans, which are called CAPs here, CAP audits. The Justice Center conducts audits of some of the corrective action plans for substantiated allegations of abuse and neglect. CAP audit finding letters are sent to providers and copied to the state oversight agency to share audit findings and any recommendations made to reduce the future risk of abuse and neglect and to improve the quality of care. Okay, we're going to next go to a break, but I'm sure there's questions.
There are questions. In fact, you're a mind reader, Krista. So what's the average cycle time of a Justice Center investigation?
I don't have that exact number in front of me right now. I'm sure we could get it and get back to you, and I think it's on the website. I can look it up over the break, but I don't want to give the incorrect number out.
Okay. And investigations can vary in length for a number of reasons. If it's criminal, if we have a hard time getting in touch with staff. So there's a number of reasons. But we do have contact information. If something is lingering a long time, we encourage you to reach out to our supervising investigators and ask the status of things. How long does the Justice Center keep unsubstantiated cases in its database? And follow-up question to that is, do unsubstantiated cases ever get referenced in future cases?
Unsubstantiated cases are sealed immediately. So we actually put a sealing into our system and the VPCR, and no, they wouldn't be referenced in future cases.
Okay. If an agency gets a Category 4 finding, will that affect the agency's funding?
The agency's what?
Funding.
Oh, that I can't speak to. I'm sorry. I'm not sure of the answer to that. If needed, we could try to get back to you on
right.
that.
It's up to your state oversight agency, your licensing agency, and funding agency. If a person receives 2 Category 2s for the same incident, will they go on the staff exclusion list?
No.
Right. Can someone on the staff exclusion list work in a public school?
Well, I think it would depend on what you were doing at that school. So it goes back to, you're not allowed to work with people who are considered of special needs population in New York State. So it would really depend on where the school was located, who were students there, and what you would be doing.
And there was a question if placement on the staff exclusion list is permanent, and if a person has a right to appeal. We're going to be covering appeals after the break, but once appeals are exhausted, placement is permanent. And then the last question before the break, is there any implication if a person has a number of more than one Category 3 finding?
No, so they don't stack or toll. So it's not as if you get 3 Category 3s and it becomes a 2 or something like that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And those are sealed after 5 years.
Right. And we can't tell other employers about it. It's confidential. All right. We will take a break and see you in 5 minutes.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. And I did confirm right now our average cycle time is 77 days. I just wanted to get the exact number for everyone. All right, so now I'm going to talk to you all about the appeals process. So the subject of a substantiated report of abuse or neglect, regardless of the category, has the right to challenge that finding within 30 days. So it's called a request for appeal. We call it an RFA here. It's no specific form. It can be a letter, which includes the VPCR case serial number and says, I want to appeal. It can be that simple. It can be a letter that includes the reason why a subject thinks the determination is not appropriate, but you don't have to do that. It must be timely, meaning sent within the 30 days of the determination letter. There is a provision for a late notice of appeal in extraordinary circumstances. We may accept a late request, but I wouldn't rely on that. It really does. We do look at the circumstances and what it is. So there's a multi-stage appeal process, meaning first the subject would request that appeal. Next, it would go to our de novo unit, and that unit is separate from the Office of General Counsel. They conduct a thorough review of the investigation to see if a preponderance of the evidence did support the findings of abuse or neglect. So they could choose to keep the findings as is. They may say that, no, we don't find a preponderance here, and unsubstantiate it. If the appeal is denied, a fair hearing before an administrative law judge is scheduled. And during that process, there'll be a conference ahead of time, generally with the subject, the attorney, who is assigned to the case, and that administrative law judge. So here's the potential outcomes of an appeal. The original finding is upheld, meaning if it was substantiated, it will remain substantiated and the category level will remain the same. It could be that the substantiation is amended by reducing the category level. So say you're found a category 1, maybe it could be brought down to a 2, which in that case you wouldn't be on the SCL anymore. It's important to note, though, that we can never increase the category level. So you're never going to get a stricter punishment by appealing. It can only remain the same or less. Or the findings are unsubstantiated entirely and the record is sealed. So on our website, there's guidance for the appeals process. So you can find it on the Justice Center website in the Providers and Staff tab. And there's a written document about what you need to know about the appeals process. Okay, do you have questions?
Yep, there are a few questions. Can a personal representative ever appeal an unsubstantiated finding?
No, they cannot.
And there's been a number of questions about the length of time of investigations. Maybe it took a little longer. We have dropped, I believe, we're going to be dropping our supervisor, investigative supervisor's contact list into the chat, and that will also be sent out after this session. So we encourage you, if you've got something that's lingering, to not suffer in silence and contact one of the supervising investigators. And there's also been a number of questions about our Justice Center corrective action plan audits. How do you submit proof? You know, what happens? We have guidance on our website under the prevention tab, and that gives it walks a provider through what they need to do to be prepared for a corrective action plan audit and how to respond to issues. And next question is, Krista, what is a de novo unit?
De novo unit is a separate unit from the Office of General Counsel. They're actually a part of our Special Prosecutor Inspector General unit. And what they do is take an independent review and look at the case. So initially, the case would go to the case closure unit. That's within the Office of General Counsel. They are who write the initial finding letters and send them out. And similarly, when it gets to the appeal unit, that's also under the Office of General Counsel. However, the middle stage is the de novo unit, which is not under the Office of General Counsel. So it's truly a fresh look at the case to see whether or not they agree that there was a preponderance.
All right, thank you. I believe that Chief Ryan is going to take over the next section.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, Krista. So next we're going to talk about our mortality reviews that are conducted by the New York State Justice Center's mortality unit. So what is reported? So the mortality review jurisdiction, Executive Law 556 and 557, is that all deaths in residential settings licensed, operated, or certified by OPWDD, OASIS, OCFS, and OMH are required to be reported to the Justice Center. Also required for any death in these settings up to 30 days post-discharge. The provider's role in when the death occurs. The provider is required to make a report to the VPCR as soon as there was awareness to the death. We are to complete a report of death form and submit to the New York State Justice Center within 5 business days. You are also allowed and required to conduct any mortality or incident review activities in accordance with your state licensing agency's regulations, unless there is an attached abuse neglect case with forbearance. The number of mortality reviews that we've conducted for the past 3 years, in 2020, we conducted 2,170 reviews. In 2021, we conducted 1,685 reviews. And last year, 2022, we conducted 1,704 reviews. So they were deaths that were received by the Justice Center in that year. The overview of the mortality review unit. Many mortality assessments are closed on the assessment without further need for review. The incident call reports. We have the completed death report form. We pull provider incident materials to review, and we provide provider follow-up inquiries. We also obtain the death certificate with the official cause and manner of death. Any mortality case that has an outstanding concern on the initial assessment will result in a delegation of reportable incident investigations. In other words, if while we're conducting our review on the cause and manner of death, if there is a significant incident that is identified in there or a reportable incident, we ourselves will make the report to the VPCR, and that will be handled accordingly. We complete closure letters with recommendations, or we'll conduct a full mortality review with potential site visits and reports issued from the Medical Review Board. New York State Justice Center's Medical Review Board has 15 voluntary members. They make preliminary determinations when a death is deemed unusual or warrants investigation. Provides collective medical opinion and recommendations on cases brought to its attention for review.
I have just one question. How many mortality reports include an allegation of abuse and neglect in an average year?
So we probably average between 90, maybe about 100 to 110 abuse, neglect, death cases each year. And it's not always upon the initial report that allegation of abuse or neglect is detected. Quite often, I think upwards of 70% of the abuse, neglect, death cases that are created here at the Justice Center are identified through our initial assessment of the and review of the death by our mortality review unit.
Thank you, Chief Ryan. Before I turn it over to Paula Branca-Santos, I just want to note that we have dropped the PDF that contains the list of our supervising investigators into the chat, so you can access that.
Thank you very much. And I was about to look, it still is morning, so good morning, everyone. My name is Paula Branca-Santos, and I am the Deputy Special Prosecutor working for the Special Prosecutor Inspector General Rachel Dunn here at the Justice Center. And before I go on to detail what it is that the Special Prosecutors Unit does, I think that it's important for everybody to understand where we come from. And the roles that we take. We are all in our unit former prosecutors in our former professional lives, working across the state at various district attorneys' offices throughout the state. So we come with that background. However, when we left that world to come to this world, we were quickly immersed and learned from the best of the best here how to put our skills as prosecutors together with the new skills that we are acquired and are required of our job and duties here at the Justice Center. So in terms of what our role is, criminal investigations is just a small part of what we do, and I'll talk more about that later. What we start with is collaborating with all of the units here at the Justice Center. Everything that Krista Book and Tony Ryan have talked about, the special prosecutors take a role in those things as well. We are involved in many conversations with the Office of Investigations, as well as the Office of General Counsel. And those conversations take place on many of our cases. Most of our days are spent with them. So how does it happen from top to bottom? Criminal investigations, like I said, are a very small percentage. However, it is our job and our duty to look at allegations of abuse or neglect that come in from a call that have been classified as either immediately criminal, and those are very few and far between. That would be something, if I could explain it as an example, that comes in if a person receiving services gets hurt to the extent that police are immediately called and an arrest is effectuated immediately, or it is something so blatantly obvious. Like I said, that is very rare. Instead, there may be something that comes across, and we have to decide whether or not, given our experience as former prosecutors and our conversations with prosecutors in the different offices, whether or not it rises to that level. An analysis is done as to whether or not a case can be successfully charged, tried, and prosecuted in a DA's office, not by a preponderance who you heard that word used either by Chief Ryan or by Krista Book before. Preponderance of the evidence is a Justice Center standard of proof. At hearing in criminal world, it is beyond a reasonable doubt. But we take a very hard look at that and see whether or not any of these allegations rise to the level of a criminal offense. Can we, the Justice Center prosecutors, actually try those cases? Like Krista was saying before, sometimes things just depend. There is case law out there right now that says that we cannot independently prosecute them. However, we can prosecute them if we work out some type of method of understanding with the district attorney's offices, and we either assist them by being co-counsel, or they could sign some type of a consent form that it follows legal principles, wherein we would be the lead prosecutors answering to the district attorney's office in each jurisdiction. So like I said, it's kind of a maybe situation, but we are always there under our statutory obligation and our professional obligation to assist local DA's offices. That's the second point here, as needed. We don't just wait for them to reach out to us. We are proactive. We reach out to them, understanding their case volume that they have, and we engage in conversation. The next slide will explain this more in depth. However, all criminal cases, if we decide that something is criminal, that doesn't mean that nothing happens at the Justice Center. There are parallel cases. We'll always have the admin case, even if there is a criminal case or even if there is not a criminal case. So again, like I said, only a small percentage of cases are criminal from the onset, for sure. And even when we go through the analysis, it's still a small percentage that they would come through and be reclassified as criminal after the analysis. How does the actual coordination with the district attorney's office happen? So given the fact that all of us have worked in district attorney's offices, we're fortunate to have forged different relationships. We are also part of the District Attorneys Association of New York. We participate in many networking functions as well as legal discussions so that we keep up with the various case law that is happening throughout the state. So if we get a case that comes in and it's kind of on, it's kind of in the middle, there's a balance to be had, whether or not we feel like it rises to the level, we will reach out to our counterparts in law enforcement. And if we decide that it does rise to the level, after consultation with investigations, it always is hand in hand with our office investigations, we will call the ADA, who is the liaison with that particular office, to the SPIG unit, Special Prosecutor Inspector General, and we will have a conversation with them. Then, as more of a systemic process driven avenue, we also have, once that switch is made from a potential criminal case to an actual criminal case, our computer system will actually make a notification to the liaisons at the district attorney's office. So they will get an actual notification on their computer saying there has a case that has been marked criminal. Now, a word of caution, just because a case is marked criminal in our system doesn't mean that there will be an arrest. It just means that it has that overarching analysis that has been done where a keener eye, a further investigation, conversations with the DA's office and local law enforcement will look at it to see if an arrest is appropriate in a particular case. Again, the administrative investigation is still happening, and we are very proud to have worked with investigations, particularly this year. And since I'm hesitant and knock on wood about the tail end of COVID, to have our investigators on cases where we believe there's a criminality work together with local law enforcement, where they can actually participate in interviews together. We set up a number of calls, the prosecutors do, with the DA's office, us being the prosecutors, our investigators, and local law enforcement. This way, we are all of one view how investigations are carried out, what interviews can be done collaboratively, because our mission is always to make sure that a witness, a person receiving services who is already vulnerable, who has already been through so much with a particular incident, doesn't get asked questions by multiple people. We sometimes bring them, depending on the nature of the allegation, to a child advocacy center where an expert forensic interviewer will be the one to have the interview with that person receiving services. So there it runs the gamut. And because of all of these things that I just mentioned, criminal cases do take longer to close. So I know somebody asked about cycle time before, and I believe that the number was 77 as of today to close a case. Criminal cases are always going to take a little longer because you now have local law enforcement who is involved, the DA's office who is involved, and they are looking at that broader standard of proof, higher standard of proof, and they want to make sure that they have everything that they need. And a lot of times we hold our cases, the admin cases, for a little bit while that is happening. If we do believe at a certain point of the investigation that we have enough to move forward administratively without impacting the criminal case at all, we will move that case forward. So now prevention
There's
of the
couple questions about
sorry.
this part. That's okay, no problem. Do witnesses have to testify in court if it's a criminal case?
In court, during criminal proceedings, the answer is maybe. So I can tell you from my experience as a prosecutor, it's always a balance, and you weigh what the value of that person's testimony would be.
Okay. And then the next question is, if a case has been delegated, given to the provider agency to investigate, and then as they investigate, they find something that is criminal, what should they do?
So I know what my experience has been. However, I might want to defer to Chief Ryan on this. I know that there is a process by which we can then look at it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paula. So it's just as if a new allegation is discovered during the course of an agency investigation, I would report that to the VPCR because it may lead to that case being upgraded. It may lead to the Justice Center taking the lead in the investigation. I think the most important part for us as the Justice Center is that if local law enforcement becomes involved in a case that is assigned to the agency, without question, advise the Justice Center. And like I said, you could make that report to the VPCR. And if the Justice Center was going to then take the lead in that investigation, we would notify that agency, we'd notify that investigator because we would want their materials that they've collected up to that point in our possession and uploaded to the VPCR.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief Ryan.
And last question. So if a case is criminal, what role does the provider agency have during the investigation?
So I don't think that they necessarily go hand in hand. I would say that if a case goes criminal, what the provider agency could expect would be a request for documents. And if it's a criminal investigation, there probably would be a subpoena attached from the DA's office who is investigating the case.
All right. Thank you. Carry on.
Thank you. So we are nearing the end. And of course, prevention of abuse and neglect is a large part of any agency initiative, and proud to say that it's part of our initiative, because if we prevent it, then we don't need to have everything, and we spare somebody from having something happen to them, especially the family members of person receiving services, and the person receiving services, of course, paramount themselves. So we do at the Justice Center a spotlight on prevention. These are guidelines and areas of support that the provider agencies, as well as families and people receiving services, can go through. Click on each of these. I encourage you, the agency self-assessment, best practices for an abuse-free environment, and of course the code of conduct. Again, this is our website at the bottom. Feel free to just go on and take a look around. And we also have these toolkits that we are happy to present at various meetings that we're asked to go to, at various presentations such as that. I think that these are great reminders, and they should, as reminders always are, be something that we kind of keeping our own toolkit to go back to. Every once in a while, not only we, but every provider agency, family members should be taking a look at these on a basis where you're keeping refreshed and up to date. And again, the website is a fantastic way to make sure that you can navigate all of these different things and get answers to all of your questions. Thank you.
This is the contact information. The last few remaining questions have been, will the PowerPoints from other sessions be available? Will the presentations from other Justice Center Summit sessions be available on the website? And they absolutely will. And remember, we'll be sending you an evaluation, hopefully at the end of this week for this year's Summit session, and we welcome your feedback and suggestions for next year's session. So I don't see anything else in the chat. Anything else in the chat that isn't really specific? There is one question. Someone wants to know just a little bit more about if something is classified as a significant incident, what's the life cycle of a significant incident? Once it's reported to us and we classify it as a significant incident, we provide that to the state agency that licenses the program. And then that agency, along with the provider agency, take a look at those incidents, and they take whatever corrective action plans that they think would be called for based on what the significant incident was. But we don't make any classifications. We don't investigate those. And the definition of a significant incident, all of those things can be found on our website. I want to thank you all for and the appeals process is also on our website. So I want to thank you all for attending, and have a nice afternoon.